What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of SSPN Postgame in the fourth quarter in the 2024-2025
Mm.
NBA preseason. Your San Antonio Spurs are up 82-79 with about 10 and a half minutes left. We got Sandro Mamukelashvili, Malachi Branham, CD Sissoko, Stephon Castle, and Blake Wesley all on the floor at the moment. Stephon Castle's driving inside, goes up for a layup. It's going to be missed, but Mamu gets the board. It's back outside. Not to just do play-by-play, but I gotta tell the people what's going on here as we speak. And Mamu almost hit another three on a little pass out from Stephon Castle. But with that being said, we're here to talk about the San Antonio Spurs and the first three quarters of this game, Ethan. What were your thoughts whenever it came to your first look at Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama on the floor for the Spurs tonight, on top of some other takeaways with a lot of the other guys on the floor that I'm sure we'll get into?
Yeah, obviously CP looks physically and aesthetically amazing in the San Antonio Spurs uniform, a dream come true. I thought he and Wemby played well off of each other for the most part. There was obviously some rust that they had to kind of get through. And honestly, everybody that was involved in a Victor lineup in that first half kind of felt like they were trying to play through some rust, play through some uncomfortableness. A lot of that's probably due to this is their first time playing
Mm-hmm.
with Victor and Chris Paul on the floor at the same time. So there was kind of a learning curve, and it didn't help that Victor looked a little out of sorts during his 23 minutes of play, only 4 of 15 from the field, missed all of his threes. He did have 9 rebounds and 4 assists, but also 4 turnovers and only 11 points. He just looked like he was rushing things a little too much, made some silly passes, went for some flashy plays that didn't pan out. If those had panned out, we'd be speaking a different story. So I'm not going to, drag on that too much. But it looked like there were just some learning curves I had to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair to both of them, as they continued to play toward the end of those 23 minutes, they started to look a lot better together on the floor. And then the rest of the game with their lineups that we had kind of already seen with Stephon, with Blake, Malachi, Mamu, CD, those guys looked really good together. So we can get into more detail later on, but obviously one game under their belt, their chemistry looked a lot more fluid.
Yes. Definitely when you touch on that second unit, it seems like there's a lot more cohesion tonight, after what we saw in game one. And, obviously you had Keldon and Trey out there in game one. Those guys are sitting tonight. I might be
Yep.
forgetting another name in our rotation, but I want to say it's just them two that were out tonight that we saw in game one. Blake just hit a tough layup.
Saw that.
I think they're going to give him an and one here
Yep.
too in transition, just kind of threw it up. They're giving me the replay here. Turned on the gas, full court, off balance, kind of fading to the right baseline, throws it in, and Keldon is hype in like a suit that he's wearing today
Looks good.
on the bench. So love to see that from Blake Wesley. And I don't want to just ignore everything that you just said, but because Blake just hit that and one here, that is my biggest takeaway by
Yeah.
far tonight. We can get into Chris Paul and Wemby and them being on the floor together for the first time. Victor getting back out on the floor, being excited, after the Olympics, getting his feet back under him. I mean, if we're going to sit here and be like, oh, Wemby went 4 for 15 tonight, this is a bad sign.
Yeah.
Like it's just totally devoid of context. But what isn't devoid of context is Blake Wesley in these first two preseason games. Again, just two preseason games, looking very controlled, doing a lot of the little things, the pass vision showing up again, forcing multiple turnovers throughout the game on defense,
Yep.
whether that be carries, steals, etc. And also making and ones in transition, as we just saw here in the fourth quarter, man. Again, not to repeat what we said in our preseason breakdown from Monday, but Blake, all the things that the
Mhm.
checklist of improvement boxes, I mean, he's checking them right now. I mean, just looks so much more controlled, so much more honed, and bluntly, so much more developed.
Yeah, and he looks fantastic. And I saw a lot of people on Twitter calling him out and saying he wasn't playing well in that first game. I would encourage you to look at the actual footage and not just base it off the box score, even though his box score is really solid.
Right.
5 points so far, 5 assists, 3 steals, 3 rebounds. 0 turnovers, like you said, looking very controlled, and really looking like a true point guard as well, very confident in how he's carrying himself. Pushing the tempo, yes, but not turning the ball over is big for him. And then his defense with Stephon, like Cowboy Tanaka is saying, with them at the 1 and 2, is really difficult for the Orlando Magic backcourt on that second unit. They are pressuring, they're getting steals in the open floor, playing the passing lanes. They look fantastic together. Malachi, who had 17 minutes tonight, is kind of that third guy in that rotation of guard slash wings with Blake, Stephon, and him. He went 4 for 12. He was positive in the plus minus 11 points. Again, I feel like it's the same story.
I
When
was
he's
gonna
taking
say, I
guys,
feel like it's the same story as last game, like,
yeah,
exactly.
he's taking guys off the dribble. He doesn't look great. But when he's just playing off of Steph and Blake, who are creating in the lane and catching and shooting, he looks solid. And
He was executing on those shots too, just
he
like
was
last game.
executing. Yes, and I think he's playing better without the ball. It's just he's gotta get some of those shots to fall when he has it in his hands, and I think if he doesn't do that, that will limit his rotational minutes, but like you said, Blake is making a very strong case for meaningful backup point guard minutes this year.
Yeah, man, another guy who's making a case for some minutes, I think, is Julian Champagny.
Mm,
I'm not exactly sure what his stats are, but we kind of saw tonight, we talked about who was going to be in that starting lineup, in the absence of Devin Vassell. It seems like that starting lineup is going to kind of be, first of all, aside from Devin Vassell, it seems like the starting lineup, if we go based off of tonight, it is going to be, some iteration, like most likely when fully healthy, Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama. I know,
yeah,
there was a little bit of thought, okay, are we going to maybe play Harrison Barnes, off the bench at the backup four? Seems like it's going to be what you and I thought with our rotation predictions of what we would like. And with Julian in the starting lineup tonight, that probably means that in those first 5 games, that's probably what we're going to see, especially with some of the inconsistencies with Malachi that we've kind of just harped on. But, if you want to look at it really sunshine and rainbows, Ethan,
mhm.
I mean, technically in that lineup, Malachi would be playing off the ball. And when he's been put in those situations, we've seen him play better. But with that being said, still Julian's skill set, first of all, he's surpassed, what Malachi's done in these first
Yep.
2 preseason games. And his skill set, just kind of fits, I think, that situation uh a little bit more. But regardless, I think, if you want to take anything away for the regular season from tonight, I think the starting lineup is probably something that you could be like, okay, that's actually going to have an impact when the games start mattering.
Big time. I would echo everything that you just said, and Julian was fantastic tonight, and he went 4 for 10 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3, 12 points. He was -4 in the box score. I'm not entirely sure why that is, because to me, he played solid defense, and even when he had to put the ball on the floor, he really made the right play. And Cowboy Tanaka has a comment there. He and Sohan, as a
Uh-huh.
two-man play, looked phenomenal tonight. And Julian with wraparound passes, nice pocket passes, driving to the rim. He looked a little bit better than he did last year, a little more comfortable when it comes to that aspect of his game. And we can jump into Jeremy if you're all right with doing that. Uh,
Absolutely.
20 minutes, 5 of 6 from the field. Missed the 1 3 that he took, but if I remember correctly, it was kind of a forced 3 later in the shot clock. I don't think it was like a uncontested, design for him to take the shot, but he did miss it. Hit both of his free throws, 2 of 2, 2 assists, 3 boards, and positive in the plus minus, but his defense tonight was very impactful. His point of attack on perimeter defenders was terrific. He forced, I think, 1 or 2 turnovers, where one of them might have been a steal that led to a fast break layup. And then physically, he's definitely has his confidence to defend bigs down low. I think we saw him against Paolo a couple times. Sure, Paolo might have got him once or twice, but he had a block early, and I think his strength was a key to slow down some of those bigs.
Yeah, I did have an inkling in my brain that it might have been early in the shot clock, and that
Mm.
Cowboy Tanaka does kind of confirm it here. It was the
Oh,
first shot of the
right,
game from
right.
Paul, uncontested. Um,
What am I thinking of?
No, you're good. You're good. Well, there were a lot of plays that he made. One of the other things I had written down tonight was late in the shot clock in this game, There was one that he got
Yes.
on the left wing where it was kind of similar to the play that we saw at the beginning of the game in the Thunder game on Monday, but it was late in the shot clock, where in that one it was early in the shot clock where he didn't force up a three. But
Right.
still, in this situation, he didn't force up a three. He drove inside. Really, it may not be the prettiest thing when you're seeing him driving inside, but it doesn't matter because he found a way to go in traffic, make a tough layup, kind of contorting himself on the left side of the basket to get it off the glass.
Yeah.
So that's something, that we're continuing to see through these first two preseason games is Jeremy putting the ball on the floor, whether that be in the beginning of the shot clock or in a situation, where he's getting the ball on the left wing with about like 3 to 4 seconds left and finding a way to get a basket. I don't think that's something that would have happened last year.
No, I think it's a direct result of the point guard experiment, which was so bad, but at least now he's comfortable putting the ball on the floor in those situations. Last point on Jeremy, great positioning in terms of offensive rebounds and putbacks. I think he had 2 or 3 tip-ins off of missed shots. Wemby from 3, Mamu on a missed layup. Those two come to mind, but I'm pretty sure he had one more.
Yes, yes, yes. Getting a little distracted here because one, I had the wrong notes up, and two, it is 92 to 89 at the moment. Riley Minix pulling up from 3 on the left wing misses this one, but the Spurs are in a 3-point game with about 5:30 left in this one. Harrison Ingram, Brandon Boston, Malachi Flynn, Riley Minix, and Malachi Branham on the floor. So this kind of really is going to be like, hey, Malachi, you're the leader in this unit right now. You don't have to take every shot. You don't want to force things like we were talking about, but also, this would be kind of your moment
Yeah.
to take over a game and try to get us a win here, being the most experienced guy on the floor, at least with the Spurs.
For sure. He needs to step up in this situation, given, the situation in terms of play time this year. Um, but I think when we talk about Harrison Barnes next, Jude, in that starting lineup, he didn't have a great game. He kind of got lost is the wrong word. He just wasn't found when it was his turn to score. He only took 3 shots and he missed the
Yeah.
1 3 that he took. Again, I think that comes from the discombobulation of the entire team with Victor on the court, with CP trying to find his way as well. The ball just didn't find him. He was -9 in the plus minus. I'm not too worried about it because his presence again was felt in terms of just trying to bring some cohesion, especially to that second unit when he was kind of the only starter that stayed in with the bench.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that discombobulation in the first quarter, Robert Ball puts it well here. Looking forward to us shooting better than 30% from
Yeah.
the field in the first quarter. I don't want to go all over the place because I know we probably should go in depth a little bit. People want to hear about Chris Paul and Wemby and how that offense looked and all of that. But there's so many things to talk about tonight. Wemby's Castle, of course, in the chat says Stephon Castle is absolutely insane. I just saw his box score. Obviously, I thought he played well, looked much more comfortable, and more controlled. Also, you really saw, a difference from the Monday game to the game tonight. 7 for 10, 17 points. How many steals? The rest of his box score, Ethan? I think you might have it pulled
He
up.
had 2 steals, 1 turnover.
Right. Yeah. How many assists? Was it 4?
4 assists, 2 rebounds.
There you go. But yeah, 17 points, 7 for 10 from the field, 2 threes as well. A tough one
7
there.
of 10 from the free throw line.
Oh, my
4
bad.
4 of 9 from the
Thank
field.
you.
No,
Thank
you're
you
good.
for I saw that on the screen here that I have, and I glanced at it because we're on stream
All
and
good.
thought I saw FG. But thank you. But still, 7 for 10 from the free throw line for
That's good.
Stephon Castle. When we talk about shooting, being a question mark for him coming into the season, that's pretty solid. And still 4 for 9 from the field. Definitely a big jump up in comparison to what we saw on the Monday game. And even in the Monday game, we were coming out of that seeing some good things in terms of his feel for the game and everything like that. But also what I want to touch on with Stephon Castle was him on the floor with Blake Wesley. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but there was even one lineup where we had Chris Paul, Blake Wesley, and then Stephon Castle. I think it might have been Wemby and Harrison who were also on the floor in that lineup. But regardless, we were essentially playing Stephon Castle at the 3 there. And that ties into his versatility, that we talked about all, draft content that we did over the summer. So that was nice to see. Obviously, we know what his role is going to be moving forward long term, but in this season, where he's kind of having that similar UConn role where he's going to fit in, where he can, and, just kind of adapt to everything around him with the scenario this season with Chris Paul on the floor. I love to see that. When they were out there. And even then, we still saw a lot of times where it was Blake and Steph as the 1 and the 2. And when those two were on the floor, like there's a reason that they put them on the floor with Wemby and CP3. Because I mean, their defense, they wanted to get a look at it, to see, because of the way that they're playing defense, when you compare that next to some of those guys. I'm not saying that's going to be a lineup that we're going to see a ton in the regular season, but it's definitely something that we can get excited about whenever we think about the future of this team.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in context of this season. Sure, he's got a lot of playmaking ability. He can be a point guard. He's got that in his bag. But in context of this year, seeing him move without the basketball as a cutter off of pin
Yes.
downs, and then not just scoring, but making the right play on the next possession, whether that be a wraparound pass, a pocket pass, whatever it may be. He consistently did that tonight. His shooting stroke looked strong. And dude, he's a tough dude. Like he there was a moment in the game where I literally wrote down, we're not taking it into the paint with the intent to score. And
Yeah.
then he checked into the game and he immediately took it to the hole trying to score. And it proved, helpful because he got to the free throw line 10 times and knocked down 7 of them. He was the
Yeah.
only guy to do it at that volume. Wemby only had 5 free throws. He's 7'4". Like he's playing strong, he's playing aggressive, and I love to see it from the young rookie. He's not scared.
Absolutely. You mentioned the cuts. That made me think of another thing whenever it came to Jeremy. This was mentioned a little bit earlier in the comments from Cowboy Tanaka, just with the Jeremy Julian two-man game that we kind of
Yep.
saw tonight. There were like 4 or 5 different possessions where it was either Julian, I think the majority of them was Julian passing to Jeremy on cuts inside that led to
Mhm.
dunks. But there were also some other times where out of the post, Jeremy was able to find Julian Champagny for an open 3 and as well as a layup. So it was nice to see the chemistry between those two guys. But really, you saw Jeremy Sohan, now that he's not forced to be the point guard, he's not forced to, take as many outside jumpers as he had, in the past circumstances that we saw last year. You're seeing him get to be a cleanup guy.
Mhm.
You're seeing him get to cut to the rim and, go for dunks, which is really his game. And we talked about that leading into this season. That's really what I was thinking of him, is like
Mhm.
on the offensive glass, when he's surrounded by all these shooters, he's somebody who can go get putbacks. He did that for one of Wemby's shots tonight. I believe he did that for another shot as well.
Mamu.
So love to see that from Jeremy. Again, second preseason game. We're not sitting here saying everything's perfect. Again, we'll get into kind of the beginning of the game once we have the end of this one and kind of everything in full. It's 97-95 at the moment. About 3:48 left in this one. A foul call here. I think Orlando will end up getting the ball back, but everybody's in the bonus, so they might get free throws to tie it here. But still, saw a lot of good things from Jeremy in his new role, if you will, even though it's almost just like
Mhm.
him reverting back to who he really is as a player.
Agreed. He's definitely more comfortable. He's more confident. He's making passes out of the post, cleaning it up. Very reminiscent to Aaron Gordon, like we talked about in the offseason, offensively.
Yes. Yes. Right. Trying to think if there's anybody else that I'm
Mamu.
forgetting. Oh, yes.
We got to talk
That
about
that
Mamu,
is
man.
definitely, there was another name I was forgetting. Wemby's Castle was in here earlier. He said, "I swear, Mamu better get consistent minutes this season." You saw the jumpers tonight. What did his rebound numbers end up being?
He had 9 points, 4 rebounds, an assist, and a steal. 3 of 7 from the field, but 6 of those shots were threes. And also, he went 3 of 6 from 3. He only took 1 2-point shot, and that's the one that Sohan cleaned up.
Right, right. Man, just another argument, for why he should probably be the backup for this season. It's going to be really interesting to see how these lineups play out, though, especially with Champagny. I talked
Mhm.
about that earlier. Uh, Goopcat in the chat says Champagny might end up as the starting two at the beginning of the season. We mentioned that a little bit earlier, but my thought process with that more is he going to end up getting rotational minutes in general? I don't know. It's all going to come down. But, again, Ethan, what I'm coming to is what we said last time, what we've been saying all preseason. It's all going to come down to competition. And at the end of the day, the fact that we're even considering that, some of these guys may be vying for minutes over others, like a Julian or a Blake, which we had in our third string, projections going into the season. That is a good problem to have. And it's like, okay, well, maybe they might take, like what I was thinking in the first half, maybe they might take out Stephon and he may play in Austin for a little bit. But man, with the way that Stephon looks tonight and the defense that he provides,
Mm-hmm.
and he's the number 4 pick, like, do you want to send him to Austin?
Right.
CD Sissoko with a tough layup in traffic. I must mention that.
Yeah, some of these guys, Mamu and Julian predominantly, are making us rethink some certainties that we had just a couple weeks ago. Like you said with Stefan, like I'm having doubts about, is it Trey or Blake that's the starting, the
Mm-hmm.
backup point guard? And then you've got to think about, does Julian deserve minutes? Maybe he's the backup 3. We move Keldon to the backup 4, and then Mamu, Zach, Bassie, who's playing backup 5. Like there's a lot more conversation with that second unit that I think
Yes.
we had anticipated prior to these first 2 preseason games. And Mamu, I mean, just to touch on him real quick, he's playing very, very well. Like he's making it difficult not to play him in that backup unit because of how well. Sure, he's shooting well, but he's also playing so well off of Blake, off of Steph, off of Trey when Trey played in the first game. His ability to play make for himself and for others and be creative at getting his shot off is really making it difficult for us not to play him.
Yeah. I just think he brings too many good things, not just the spacing, but the connectivity that he brings, the hustle that he brings, the
Mm-hmm.
energy that he brings, just his basketball IQ as well. Um, the thing that makes this tough is like there could be a world where maybe we play him at the backup 5, but I think we kind of know how that's going to go in the NBA regular season, which
Yeah.
is why it really sucks that we're not going to see any of. Well, I mean, maybe we'll see if Zach plays a preseason game, but he's coming off an injury too. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't suit up until the regular season as well. I know for a fact that Charles Bassie is going to be out. I say that and watch the next Saturday's game. Zach's probably going to play.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, that's just our
but
luck.
but regardless, like it would be really nice to see both of those guys out there and maybe get some minutes in preseason, with Mamu at the 4. But at the end of the day, you got to do your best lineup.
Mhm.
Regardless of, you got to weigh the pros and cons of the deficiencies. And I hate to say this, but how big is the gap between Mamu's interior defense and Zach's from what we've seen?
I actually think it's not the defense, it's just the rebounding.
Right. Okay, fair.
And Zach's not a great rebounder, but he is 7 feet tall, and
But it's
Mamu's just
still better.
getting
Yeah.
out-heighted right now. Like,
Right.
he's got good positioning, but, like, Goga Batadze was just he was like, fathering him tonight. Like, it wasn't fair because he's just not as tall.
Which is why we want him to play the 4
Right, exactly.
at
At
the
the
end of
4,
the
he's
day.
great.
But it just would be, it would be nice to have Zach or Charles,
For
just so we
sure.
can get some scouting on that to kind of have an idea more of that backup rotation. But again, even though we're not seeing it, they are getting that in training camp. They know what those looks look like.
Mhm.
And this experience for Mamu and what he's showing right now is just, again, making a case for him to have
Mhm.
some rotation minutes for sure.
Someone else that needs a quick shout out, and I don't think he's gonna get I think he has the least likely case to get meaningful rotational minutes this year of everybody that we've discussed, and that's CD Sissoko. But he's still played very well. He's played better than I thought he was going to play because in the summer league he was, dare I say, atrocious. But in these first 2 games, he is very formidable. He's +7 tonight, 5 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 0 turnovers. 3 fouls in 16 minutes, which has always been a problem for him, but 2 of
Yeah.
3, and he hit his first 3 of the night.
Yes.
So he just looks more comfortable. He also looks more poised, more controlled, a little more confident. And we kind of know what he is. He's a connective piece offensively, and he's going to play really tough, hard nosed defense as well. Don't think there's a spot for him in the real minutes this year, but it does give me more optimism on his future with the Spurs.
Well, let's look at it this way. Blake Wesley's in year 3 right now.
Yeah.
Not saying that CD's going to have the same jump, but that's just an example. Like, you
Yeah.
can't just give up on him right now because it's 20-year-old CD Sissoko and he's still, developing and learning a lot.
Yes.
Some of the deficiencies you could say with him are similar to what we saw with Blake Wesley last season. And again, after 2 preseason games, I'm not trying to say that Blake Wesley is like, this is what he's going to be now completely, because we know that the ante is going to be upped and the intensity is going to be upped. The competition level is going to be upped in the regular season. But I don't think anybody who's watched these first 2 games can deny the improvements that we've seen from Blake Wesley, though, at the same time.
For sure. And I see the comments about some Cowboy doesn't see it for CD. Goop Cat is sick that he passed up an open 3 on Monday. I get it. He's not without his deficiencies for sure. But like Jude said, 20 years old. He's got the build already at 20 years old. He's a man. And I think he has the high IQ and just play style that if he could iron out these these deficiencies, he becomes a very, very talented all-round player for the Spurs.
Kind of what you just described is something that Sean Elliott mentioned on the broadcast when it comes to Pop. Or actually, excuse me, I think this was Jacob Toby, our new Spurs play-by-play announcer, who shouted out Ethan on Twitter this week.
Yeah.
So shout out Jacob Toby. He was mentioning how Pop just really believes in CD's potential from the first time he saw him. He loved him as a player. They just feel like they've got to unlock some things whenever it comes to their development. Yeah. And I'm going to believe in the Spurs development staff. I understand, if if you don't, but actually personally, I don't, but I understand that people have different opinions on that. But I still have some hope for CD Sissoko. And I have seen, as much as they're, not things that are going to, stick out huge on the box score. I think if you're watching the games, there's definitely some improvement, even if it's not a crazy big jump from CD. Whenever it comes, it's not just like an automatic turnover, fumbling the ball, or, the shot looking completely terrible, kind of like it did in Summer League, to be honest. Granted, that's just 1 3 that we saw tonight. He missed the other one. But again, if you watch the game, you can see the little improvements there, just being more controlled and kind of honed as a player. But more importantly, Ethan, the Spurs win 107-97 against the Orlando Magic. First win of the year. As much as it is just a preseason game, that is nice to see.
Yeah, especially since we started off so badly. It's nice that we had a real comeback in that second and third quarter, and then the third/fourth stringers that are fighting for a contract spot managed to pull it out with a 10-point victory. That's kind of impressive. How much were we down early, Jude? I think we were down by
we were down 36-20 in the second quarter. I know.
16 points. That's a real solid comeback.
Yeah, the second quarter was definitely an improvement. This wasn't the prettiest game from anybody. And I do want to mention too that Orlando is, they're dealing with a lot right now. Definitely want to send my thoughts and prayers to anybody in Florida. I am a hurricane baby myself, so that definitely hits home. And I'm glad that the Spurs can kind of offer them a practice facility for the next couple days. But I know with the game going on, we've kind of gone over all these players, gone all over the place a little bit. But let's go ahead and just do a little kind of full game breakdown here from the beginning, now that we have a Spurs win in the books, Ethan. So let's talk about that first quarter. What were your takeaways? Like I said, I know we kind of already touched.
Yeah, I already said them all. You can just read your notes. I have nothing to add.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Well, I mean, really, the main thing that I would say is, if you're looking at this and you're coming into the game and you see some things that maybe you were a little bit frustrated with the early offense, it's just Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama's first game playing together. It's also Chris Paul and the entire team's first game playing together. And this is the main thing that I wanted to bring up with you, Ethan, and kind of get your thoughts on it. There was one possession like early in the first quarter where Chris Paul was just on the right wing and was kind of dribbling. And it looked like he was like, waiting for people to cut or like there to be some off ball movement. And everybody just kind of stayed put.
Yeah.
And I think that was a little bit of a realization moment for Chris Paul in the sense like, okay, I'm not playing on the Warriors anymore. All these other teams that I've been playing on, as much as we have used the example with Devin Booker and the young Thunder as well with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, this is still, a completely different scenario when it comes to the context of the team. So I think my biggest takeaway from that is one, Wemby just kind of getting his feet back under him, and there being that discombobulation, like you mentioned. But also the other thing that I think I realized is that Chris Paul was out there and was like, okay, there's some things that, I'm used to that are just like second nature for me as a 40-year-old Hall of Famer, that these guys, it's not second nature to them. But I think as you saw, as the game went on, they got a little bit more comfortable. There were still some things that Chris Paul is going to do. He's going to find guys for open looks. He's going to set things up. And I think just as those guys get more reps together, you're going to see less and less discombobulation. But I think the main cause of that is Chris Paul's first game with the team and Wemby getting his feet back under him.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a feeling out process. I think it's important that Chris plays probably the rest of the preseason, to be honest, because he needs to get
Right.
used to playing with the rest of the team, and they need to get used to playing with him. Like you said, it got better as the game progressed, especially for the wing players. Victor really never did find it. He continued to kind of have to play through that rust, and he felt like he was overcomplicating things at times. But CP was not looking to score that first half. He took one shot, and it was the buzzer beater to end the quarter that he attempted as a fadeaway deep three. He didn't really take shots until the second half, and he knocked down two of them. So I'm not worried about his fit with the team. It felt like he himself was just trying to get everybody under the same page and communicate to them they need to move.
Yes, I completely agree. What I was laughing at there is Mr. Z's comment. I kind of joked about this before you got in the stream
Mm.
about Victor and going 4 for 15 tonight. He said, I've seen enough. Send Wemby to the G League.
Mm-hmm.
LOL JK. But yeah, that was kind of earlier in the show. I was kind of like, we're not freaking out about that at all. He's going to be just fine.
Right. Agreed.
Alrighty, I'm just going to read off some of my other notes that I had here during the game. But before we get to that, we forgot to mention this about our boy Jeremy Sohan whenever it comes to his jump shot. Our man TG Canoes and Kayaks in here again. We appreciate you, my guy. He says Sohan shooting free throws with both hands this season. And as Cowboy Tanaka says, he's 100% on the two-handed now. And as we saw tonight, look, it's 2 free throws. But that is a change from what we've been seeing, and the free throws looked good. They looked definitely better. I know it's just 2 free throws, but still, even just with the release and the way the ball came out, they looked pretty fluid on both of those. Again, big asterisk. We'll see how that progresses over the season. But from the 2 we saw tonight with the changed up free throw rotation or mechanics, it was good to see.
Yeah, it looks fluid for sure.
Alrighty, I'll just go ahead and read off my notes here, and then we can kind of wrap this episode up with some comments and stuff like that. So a 15-8 start for Orlando. It was kind of ugly, but again, first time of this combo of guys on the floor. Mainly Champagny free baskets was our main offense there in about the first 5 minutes. I already mentioned this, but CD's first 3 looked good. Steph missed his first 3, but he immediately went and got his own offensive rebound and dished it to Mamu for a wide open 3. So I love to see that. That's just another example of how Stephon Castle never quits on the play. That ties into kind of that UConn mentality that Dan Hurley instilled in him. Here's another thing that we haven't talked about as much. I noticed that we're not fouling as much on defense. Not saying we're perfect by any means. There's still some missed rotations and switches here and there, but I would still say overall, in comparison to the last 2 seasons, in these 2 preseason games, major asterisk, it seems like we're willing to give up open layups more. I know that may sound weird, but in the past, we would go over there and try to stop it, and then it's an and one. So it's like we know when to foul or when it's like, okay, hey, we need, it's not worth it here. We just need to let this go. We don't need our guys getting into foul trouble. We'll
Mm-hmm.
move on to the next play. I feel like I've seen that more in the past two games. Than, at least in comparison to the last two seasons, the 22 and 61s. The first lob, we didn't talk about the lob yet that Chris Paul threw to Wemby on Mo Wagner. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Definitely makes a lot of Spurs fans smile. Like I mentioned earlier, ugly first quarter, felt like CP was still figuring us out. Stephon Castle looking much more controlled tonight. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the video, so you can scroll back to see what we said about Stephon. Wemby started to wake up a little bit in the second quarter as well. And, the funny thing is he didn't even have a great first half. And I know that there wasn't anything crazy in the third quarter, but he still ended up coming out of the first half specifically with 11, 4, and 4. So it's like, even in a rough Wemby first half, he's halfway to a triple-double. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that'll tell you what you need to know about Victor. He had 3 blocks tonight as well. We started to get more in rhythm in the second quarter. Saw a lot of pass vision from Blake tonight. We touched on him earlier in the video as well. Again, just a lot of Blake notes for me. Playing with a lot of intensity, a lot of off-ball movement, causing turnovers on defense, and making good passes. Like, he had a lot of hockey assists tonight.
Mm-hmm.
That was the other thing I mentioned from Blake. And that ties into the end of the second quarter, man. We had some really good ball movement.
Yes, we did.
On 2 straight possessions at the end of the second quarter. I believe we missed the first shot, but it was like reminiscent of the 2014 beautiful game ball movement. It's not the same, but we were making like 4 to 5 passes on 2 straight possessions at the end of the second quarter. I feel like that didn't happen all last season.
Yeah, I saw someone put on Twitter, like, this is watered down 2014 beautiful game. It was exactly what you're talking about. It was like the fourth quarter. It was the first play of the fourth quarter in the first game. And I think that kind of continued into the second game, especially with the bench unit.
For sure. Just to wrap things up here in my notes, we already mentioned Steph getting that nice steal on Paolo. The other thing I liked about that steal is when we saw there was a mismatch, 3 guys went and crowded him. Mamu was another one, and we forced the turnover. Yes, it's risky. Yes, you're leaving guys open, but it's better than an easy bucket for Paolo Banchero there. So I like to see how we crashed that mismatch there. That was another thing I feel like last year we didn't see. Wemby's pass vision, we saw some good passes from him tonight. Nothing new, but still love to see that showing up on the tape tonight. Good off-ball movement from Stephon Castle. We mentioned his cuts. Love to see that. Again, I already mentioned that ball movement. Here's another thing. CP3, didn't take too many shots other than that one that you mentioned in the first half on the buzzer beater. But in the third quarter, he made a point to go take some shots on 2 straight possessions. And I was kind of thinking when he missed the first 3, it was actually, now that I think about it, I think it was 3 straight possessions. But I was just thinking, I was like, I think Chris was like, okay, I should probably put some shots up just so I can get used to this basket. That was kind of what I was thinking. But what it made me think about is we've seen Chris Paul's entire career, him hitting those midi jumpers, and we know it very well, especially when you go back to that playoff series where one of those midi jumpers, put the dagger in the end of our season. But the other thing that we've seen Chris Paul do is be a solid shooter as a 3-point shooter as well. And I don't know if you remember this, Ethan, but there was at a point last year where I realized Wemby standing in front of somebody could almost work like a pick. And we saw that tonight on Chris Paul's second 3 that he took, where it doesn't necessarily like, it is technically a pick and roll, but it's also like Wemby, just because he's so tall, all he needs to do is stand in front of somebody to create some space. And that's enough, for a guy like Chris Paul. So I'm excited to see the Chris Paul Wemby pick and roll throughout the season. Obviously, we could have said that since he got signed, but specifically what I'm referencing there is the opportunities for Chris Paul to get up jumpers with all the attention that Victor draws. I texted some of my friends tonight. I was like, the Chris Paul cheesy jumpers are now ours.
No, for sure. And I think when you look back at the first quarter and how discombobulated it was, if this is game 1 of the regular season and Wemby can't buy a shot like he was and the offense looks a little out of place, Chris Paul is going to take a bunch of those mid-range jumpers, Jude. He's not going to let the team get saved by Julian Champagny hitting a couple threes, right? He will implore himself to hit those mid-range jump shots like you're saying, get open behind Wemby. He didn't do that tonight because it's preseason. He just wanted to get everybody else active.
Right. Getting back to the notes here a little bit, like we mentioned this earlier, multiple assists from Julian to Jeremy on cuts, as well
Ooh.
as my bad, very my bad.
Yeah, that's funny.
Um, but and also vice versa with Jeremy to Julian. The Jeremy late shot clock layups was nice to see him creating late in the shot clock. He did that also on one of the passes that he made to Julian for a three, which was nice. Sohan cleanup duty and cuts on display. Blake was everywhere all game. Mamu shot well, and especially the pick and pops is easy offense for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing I had written down with Castle drawing all those fouls, getting to the line 5 times tonight. His physicality for a 19-year-old, you're already kind of seeing him impose it. Again, 2 preseason games. Everything we say is that asterisk tonight. But
Mm-hmm.
putting his shoulder into guys for a 19-year-old coming into the league, he is a physical specimen. I'll put it that way.
Now he's a man already. He and CD Sissoko are anomalies in the sense that they have a man's body at 19 years old. CD's now 20, but I think you know what you're thinking. I think you know what I mean.
For sure. The Alamo Visual Archive, I like what he says here. He says Blake Wesley is going to be our Nickeil Alexander
Ooh,
Walker off the bench. That's a good comparison. I hadn't thought of that yet.
that's solid. I'll take it. He continues to impress me. I will die on the Blake Wesley train, Jude. I've been on this train since last season. I wasn't on it in the first season because he was so abysmal. But last year I was on board, and this year I will continue to pilot that train as everyone else starts to realize it.
And you never hopped off,
I
Ethan.
never
That's the
hopped off.
thing. You know it's a train that I never hopped off of.
I know where this is going. Jude.
Take a guess who I was going to talk about.
Dom Beasy.
Yes. I was thinking, man, in the fourth quarter, I was like, oh, this would have been such a good time for Dominic Barlow to check in the game. But
Do you know what's
he's in
crazy is
Atlanta,
we
man.
could use him right now because
I
we need some
know.
size. We need some athletic big.
Well, remember last year, the storyline way through the year was, is Dom better than Zach? Anyways.
Yeah, it was a real story.
Shout out Dom Beasy, still in the NBA. Here's another thing that our man, the Alamo Visual Archive, says. Castle makes me forget about DeJounte. He's going to be better than DJ. Trust me. Like the take there, but I kind of had the same thought when he was out there in the number 5 and you see the point of attack defense. Again, he's already, dude, Stephon might already be more, he's definitely more stout than DeJounte already. But there's definitely some parallels to Stephon and DeJounte's game. They're different in a sense, but also there's some similarities. I'm not saying everything. Obviously, I would say their personalities off the floor are much different. But on the floor, there are some parallels that you can see, at least coming into the league with the defense and then, trying to work on the offensive game a little bit, but still having a feel for things as well.
For sure. I tried to come up with an analogy while you were talking, Jude, and the best I got is DeJounte's more of a screwdriver and Castle's more of a hammer.
Ooh, I
They
like
both get
that.
the job done, though, just in different ways.
I agree. Vane Stain in the comments, he says Castle really knows how to move around and get those 50-50
He
balls.
does.
I completely agree there. Just trying to go through the comments that I might have missed here before we wrap this one up, but I think that is pretty much it with everybody else. Million Gnu in the chat. I like my man Vane Stain just giving me Dom Barlow.
Dom Barlow, baby.
Nothing else. I love to see that. Mark Obed goes on, another SSPN OG, says Castle got that dog in him. And Million Gnu also says Castle has some really good court vision. So
He does.
We're seeing it, man. We're seeing a lot of good things. Again, this is not completely perfect. So how about we wrap up the episode with this, Ethan? What are the things that you still want this team to improve on? Because we just talked about all the little things that we're seeing, that are positive for the guys.
I need a better start, and I just want a flat line across all 4 quarters. I don't want peaks and valleys. like we continue to see in these first 2 games. And if I had to pick one more thing, just better rebounding. I know that's not really
No.
our fault, but team rebounding needs to be slightly better. We're getting outsized.
Yeah, I completely agree. Some of that, Keldon was out tonight.
Yeah.
Obviously, Charles and Bassey, we're still waiting to get them back. But still, I think there's some opportunities there in team rebounding that we've still missed. And
Yeah.
what you said too, because I was trying to think of exactly what I want to say, but you honestly summed it up perfectly. You want to see that flat line of consistency.
Mhm.
Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, that's going to take years, for
Yeah.
this team to get to. But having less of those peaks and valleys, where you have some turnovers here. There was one possession where we threw it to Jeremy Sohan and he had a mismatch with Cole Anthony and he like kind of hesitates and then just kind of chunks it and misses CP3. There was also one time where Wemby just completely chunked it trying to go for a quarterback pass. There were, and again, it's preseason. Everybody's still getting comfortable. You're not going to have that same intensity.
Right.
But I think if we could have, a little bit less of those moving forward, which inevitably are still going to happen from time to time on a young team, but if we can consistently see that lessened over
Mhm.
time, that's a good thing.
That's what the preseason's for. We gotta make those adjustments.
For sure. We appreciate you guys for hanging out with us tonight. We will not be live for the Utah Jazz game on Saturday because me and Ethan will
Mm.
be taking our Saturday night. But we will be back next week. We're not exactly sure what the schedule is going to be, but we'll be back with some preseason games. Post games are in season, whether it's the preseason or the regular season. You're going
Yes.
to be getting some sort of content from us, some sort of post game from us, basically from now until whenever the Spurs season ends. So again,
July.
we have right. Exactly. So we appreciate you guys for hanging out with us today. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe below. If you want to stay updated with the channel, be sure to follow us on X or Twitter at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all on the next one.